Jamin Park stood at the observation deck of New Busan Colony and watched his world die. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining settlement. But something was wrong with those shadows. They moved when they should not move. They grew bigger when they should stay the same size. "Sir, we have a problem," said Hyun-Woo Lee as he ran into the command center. The security chief's face was pale and his hands shook. "The mining team at Sector 7 stopped responding an hour ago. When we sent a patrol to check, they found nothing. No people, no equipment, no buildings, just empty ground." Jamin turned from the window. He had been the colony administrator for 5 years. He had dealt with equipment failures, supply shortages, and worker disputes. But he had never seen fear like this in Hyun-Woo's eyes. "What do you mean, nothing?" Jamin asked. "I mean nothing, sir. The entire mining station is gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. Gone, like it was never there." Through the window, Jamin could see the workers in the main courtyard pointing at the horizon. Dark shapes moved across the landscape. They looked like crystals the size of buildings, walking on legs made of smaller crystals. As they walked, everything they touched disappeared into their bodies. "Sound the alarm," Jamin said quietly. "Get everyone to the emergency shelters." The colony's warning sirens began to wail. 1,200 people lived in New Busan Colony. They came from Earth to mine rare metals on this distant planet. Most had families back home. All of them trusted Jamin to keep them safe. So young Kim was in the communication center when the first crystal creature reached the outer fence. She watched through the security cameras as the fence simply melted into the creature's body. The metal became part of its crystal structure. The creature grew larger. "What are those things?" she whispered into her headset. "We don't know," came Hyun-Woo's voice through the radio. "But they eat everything. Metal, plastic, concrete. Probably people too. We need to evacuate now." So Young's fingers moved across her control panel. She had been sending regular reports to Earth for 3 years. Happy reports about mining progress and successful harvests. This would be her first distress call. She opened all communication channels. Every frequency humans use to talk across the galaxy. Every emergency channel. Every military frequency. Her message would travel faster than light and reach every human ship and colony within 1,000 light years. "This is New Busan Colony on Kepler 402c, she said into her microphone. Her voice was steady even though her heart was racing. "We are under attack by unknown hostile entities. They are consuming our colony. We have maybe hours before total destruction. Anyone who receives this message, please help us. We are sending our coordinates." Outside, more crystal creatures appeared. They came in different sizes. Some were as tall as houses. Others were as big as ground cars. All of them ate everything they touched. Buildings, vehicles, equipment, trees. Even the ground itself disappeared into their crystal bodies. Hyun-Woo's voice crackled through the radio again. "All civilians to underground bunker 3. Security teams form a defensive line at the main plaza. We need to buy time for the evacuation." So Young sent her message again and again. She changed frequencies and sent it in different languages. Someone in the galaxy had to hear it. Someone had to help. Through her window, she could see families running toward the underground bunkers. Parents carried small children. Workers helped elderly colonists move faster. Everyone moved with the quick, desperate steps of people who knew death was coming. The crystal creatures made sounds as they ate. Not the sounds of breaking or crushing, but musical tones like singing crystals, beautiful and terrible at the same time. The larger creatures had deeper voices. The smaller ones sang in higher notes. Together they created a symphony of destruction. "They're learning," said a new voice on the radio. Dr. Sun-hee Bae was the colony's scientist. She studied alien life forms. "I'm watching them from the research lab. They're not just eating randomly. They're studying what they eat. Look at Building 12. Jamin looked through his window at Building 12. A crystal creature had eaten half of it, but then stopped. It stood very still for several minutes. Then it began to change shape. Parts of its body became flat and rectangular, like the building it had just consumed. "It's copying the building's structure," Sun-hee continued. "They're not mindless monsters. They're intelligent. They learn from everything they consume." This was worse than Jamin had thought. Mindless monsters you could fight or avoid. But intelligent creatures that learned and adapted were much more dangerous. So Young's radio picked up a response to her distress call. Not from humans, but from something else. The voice was strange, with clicking sounds between words. Human colony vessel, this is Veltar monitoring station. We received your distress signal. These creatures you describe are known to us. They are called devourers. You cannot fight them. You cannot reason with them. You can only run. Evacuate immediately. How many ships do you have that can help with evacuation? So Young asked. There was a long pause. We have no ships available for human evacuation. You are outside Veltar space. This is not our responsibility. The alien voice disappeared. So Young stared at her radio in disbelief. They knew about these creatures but would not help. She sent her distress call again, hoping other aliens might be more helpful. The crystal creatures reached the main plaza. Hyunwoo and his security team opened fire with their plasma rifles. The energy bolts hit the creatures and were absorbed into their crystal bodies. The creatures grew brighter and larger. They had eaten the weapon's energy and used it to grow stronger. Fall back to the bunkers, Hyunwoo ordered. Conventional weapons are useless. Jae-min made the hardest decision of his life. All personnel to Bunker 3 immediately. We're abandoning the surface colony. As families crowded into the underground shelter, So-young continued broadcasting from her communication center. She would stay until the last possible moment. Someone in the galaxy had to hear their call for help. Someone had to care that 1,200 humans were about to die. Above her, the crystal creatures sang their beautiful, deadly song as they ate her world. Admiral Taeho Choi was drinking his morning coffee when the distress signal reached his ship. The Soul's Pride was a small stealth frigate, one of Earth's newest designs. It could hide from enemy sensors and strike without warning. Right now it was 3 sectors away from human space on a routine patrol mission. Admiral, we're receiving an emergency transmission, said Navigation Officer Mira Kang from her station. It's coming from New Busan Colony. Taeho set down his coffee cup. He knew New Busan Colony, a mining operation on the edge of human space. 1,200 people working far from home to extract rare metals that Earth needed for ship construction. Put it through, he said. So-young Kim's voice filled the bridge. She sounded calm, but Taeho could hear the fear underneath. This is New Busan Colony on Kepler 442c. We are under attack by unknown hostile entities. They are consuming our colony. We have maybe hours before total destruction. Anyone who receives this message, please help us. The message repeated. Taeho looked at the tactical display. New Busan was 18 hours away even at maximum speed. His ship carried 200 crew members and enough weapons to fight other ships, but no one knew what kind of enemy they would face. Sir, said Tactical Officer Woo Jin Nam, I'm analyzing the signal. It went out on all frequencies. Every ship and station in this part of the galaxy should have received it. Any responses? Taeho asked. Several alien stations acknowledged receiving the message, but none of them are offering help. The Veltar said the humans are outside their space. The Zhek Empire is suggesting they might be willing to negotiate salvage rights to the system after the attack. Taeho felt anger rise in his chest. Salvage rights. They were already planning to pick through the bones of New Busan Colony. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the distress signal reached the Galactic Consortium's main monitoring station. The station was a massive structure built by 12 different alien species working together. It floated in neutral space, monitoring communications across the galaxy and mediating disputes between different civilizations. Commander Zichkar of the Veltar listened to the human distress call with mild interest. The Veltar were an ancient race. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. They considered most other species to be primitive, but humans were especially looked down upon. A species that had only been in space for a few hundred years and still fought wars with each other. Should we respond to this transmission? Asked his communications officer. The humans chose to build their colony outside protected space, Zichkar replied. If they cannot defend themselves, they should not have ventured so far from their homeworld. This is natural selection in action. Other species had similar reactions. The Zhek Empire saw opportunity in human weakness. If the colony was destroyed, they could claim the mineral-rich system for themselves. The Corvani Collective debated whether humans were intelligent enough to qualify for protection under galactic law. Most concluded they were not. But on his small ship, Taeho was making a different calculation. 18 hours to reach New Busan. His crew was well trained and his ship was fast, but what could they do against an enemy that could destroy an entire colony? Mira, what's our maximum speed if we push the engines beyond safe limits? He asked. The navigation officer ran calculations on her console. We could cut the travel time to 15 hours, but we'd risk engine failure. And sir, we don't know what we're flying into. This could be a trap. It could be, Tejo agreed. But those are our people sending that distress call. 1,200 humans who trusted Earth to keep them safe. If we don't help them, who will? Chief Engineer Kyung-Ho Shin spoke from the engineering station. Sir, I can push the engines harder than the computer recommends. We might damage them permanently, but we'll get there faster. Do it, Tejo ordered. All hands prepare for extended high-speed burn. We're going to New Busan. Back at the Galactic Consortium station, the debate about the human distress call continued. A junior officer from the Althari Republic suggested sending a small fleet to investigate. These devourer entities the humans describe, the officer said. They could pose a threat to other colonies if they spread. Devourers only attack species that venture too far from their homeworlds, Zichkar replied. They are a natural limit on expansion. If the humans had stayed closer to Earth, this would not have happened. The Althari officer looked at the data. But sir, New Busan is only 12 light-years from the nearest Veltar outpost. If these creatures continue to spread, then we will deal with them when they become our problem, Zichkar said firmly. We will not risk Veltar lives for human foolishness. On New Busan, the situation was getting worse. The crystal creatures had consumed most of the surface colony. Only the underground bunkers remained, and even those were not completely safe. The creatures had learned to dig. Dr. Sun Hee Bei watched them through the bunker's periscope cameras. The devourers were not randomly eating everything they found. They were selective. They consumed the power generators first, then the communication equipment, then the defensive systems. They were systematically removing the colony's ability to call for help or fight back. They're not just intelligent, she reported to Jaemin. They're tactical. They understand our technology better than we thought possible. In the communication center, So Young continued sending distress calls. Her equipment was running on backup power now. The main generators had been consumed hours ago. She had received several alien responses, but none offered help. Most were just warnings to evacuate. One message was different. A voice speaking in accented but clear human language. New Busan Colony, this is Admiral Taeho Choi of the Earth Defense Force ship Seoul's Pride. We received your distress call. We are 15 hours out and closing at maximum speed. Hold on, help is coming. So Young felt tears on her cheeks. Someone was coming. One small ship against an unknown enemy, but someone was coming. She sent a response. Seoul's Pride, this is New Busan Communications. We are in underground bunkers. Surface colony is completely consumed. Hostile entities are learning our technology. Be advised, conventional weapons appear ineffective. 18 hours had become 15. But 15 hours still felt like forever when crystal creatures were singing their deadly song above your head and slowly eating their way down to where you were hiding. In space, the Seoul's Pride's engines burned brighter than they were designed to burn. The ship shook as it pushed through hyperspace at dangerous speeds, but every person on board knew why they were risking their lives. Somewhere ahead, 1,200 humans needed their help, and in the galaxy around them, ancient alien civilizations watched and waited to see if the young species called humanity would survive its first real test among the stars. The Seoul's Pride dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, with its engines smoking and warning alarms screaming throughout the ship. Chief Engineer Kyung-Ho Shin had pushed the drive systems far beyond their safety limits. They had made the journey in 14 hours instead of 18, but the ship might never fly at full speed again. Sensors are picking up the colony location, reported Mira Kang from her navigation station. But sir, you need to see this. The main screen showed what remained of New Busan Colony. Where once there had been buildings, landing pads, mining equipment, and gardens, now there was only bare rock. The ground itself looked different, as if it had been polished smooth by some enormous tongue. It's like they licked the planet clean, whispered Tactical Officer Woo Jin Nam. Admiral Taeho Choi stared at the empty landscape. 1,200 people had lived and worked there just yesterday. Now he could see no sign they had ever existed. Life sign scan, he ordered. The sensors searched for human life signatures. For long minutes there was nothing. Then the scanner found faint readings deep underground. Bunker complex 2 kilometers below the surface, reported the sensor operator, detecting approximately 1,000 life signs. They're alive, sir. Relief flooded through the bridge crew. They were not too late. But as Taiho studied the tactical display, he realized their problems were just beginning. "Those crystal creatures the colonists described," said Wu Jin. "I'm reading dozens of them around the bunker entrance. They're not leaving. They're waiting." The Devourers had learned patience. They knew the humans were trapped underground with limited air and food. All they had to do was wait for the bunkers to become tombs. "Beam down a landing party," Taiho ordered. "Full combat gear. We're going in." Lieutenant Jinnah Rowe led the Marine squad that transported down to the planet's surface. 20 soldiers in powered armor, carrying the most advanced weapons Earth could build. They materialized 50 meters from the bunker entrance and immediately came under attack. The Devourers had changed since the first reports. They no longer looked like simple crystal creatures. They had incorporated human technology into their bodies. Some had mining laser arrays growing from their backs. Others had absorbed communication equipment and were broadcasting jamming signals. One large creature had consumed an entire hover tank and now moved on metal treads instead of crystal legs. "They're using our own weapons against us," Jinnah reported over the radio as plasma bolts flew around her squad. "These aren't the same creatures that attacked the colony. They've evolved." The Marines' return fire was absorbed harmlessly into the creatures' crystal bodies. Every energy bolt, every explosive round, every plasma burst just made the Devourers grow larger and more dangerous. "Fall back and regroup," Jinnah ordered. But as her squad retreated, more Devourers emerged from underground tunnels. The creatures had learned to dig and were now coming up behind the Marines. In the bunker below, Security Chief Hyunwoo Lee heard the battle raging above. He had been waiting for this moment for hours, preparing his people for a desperate breakout attempt. "That's our rescue team up there," he told the colonists. "But they can't reach us while those creatures are guarding the entrance. We need to help them." Colony Administrator Jae-min Park looked around the crowded bunker. These people were miners and engineers, not soldiers. They had no military training and limited weapons. But they had something else. They knew this place better than anyone. "The old mining tunnels," said Engineer Dong Jun-yoon. "They connect to the surface at 12 different points. The creatures might not know about all of them." Hyunwoo nodded. "We can create a distraction, hit them from multiple directions while the Marines push forward." On the Soul's Pride, Taiho watched his Marines being slowly surrounded by creatures that grew stronger with every weapon fired at them. This was not a battle they could win with conventional tactics. "Sir," said Dr. Sun Hee-bei's voice through the communication system. She had managed to establish contact from the bunker. "I've been studying these creatures. They absorb and learn from everything they consume, but I think I know their weakness." "Tell me," Taiho said. "They share information instantly among themselves. It's like a hive mind. But that connection works both ways. If we can confuse or overload one of them, it might affect all of them in the area." Engineer Dongjun had been working on something in the bunker's workshop. "I've been building an electromagnetic pulse device from mining equipment," he reported. "It won't destroy them, but it might scramble their shared consciousness temporarily." It was not much of a plan, but it was all they had. The colonists emerged from 6 different tunnel exits at the same time. They were not soldiers, but they were brave humans fighting for their lives. Hyunwoo led one group with improvised weapons. Dongjun carried his EMP device toward the largest concentration of Devourers. The creatures were confused by the sudden appearance of humans from multiple directions. For the first time since the attack began, they hesitated. Their hive mind was designed to share information instantly, but too much information coming from too many sources at once created chaos in their thought processes. Dongjun activated his device. Lightning arced between the crystalline creatures as their shared consciousness was disrupted. They stopped moving in coordination and began wandering randomly, bumping into each other and making discordant musical sounds. "Now," Jinnah shouted. Her Marines charged forward while the creatures were confused, but instead of shooting at the Devourers, they targeted the rocky ground around the bunker entrance, using their weapons to blast away the stone and expose the entrance. The evacuation was desperate and chaotic. 1,200 colonists had to climb up from the deep bunker, while crystal creatures slowly recovered from the electromagnetic interference. Children were passed from hand to hand up the long tunnel. Elderly colonists were carried by younger workers. Equipment and supplies were abandoned as everyone focused on getting people to safety. But the Soul's Pride was not designed to carry 1,200 people. The ship had life support for 200 crew members, not 1,400 total passengers. We'll have to strip everything non-essential, Chief Engineer Kyung-ho reported. Remove all the furniture, shut down non-critical systems, convert cargo holds to living space. Even then, it'll be tight. Do it, Tae-ho ordered. We're not leaving anyone behind. As the last colonists climbed out of their underground prison, the Devourers began to coordinate again. Dongjun's EMP device had bought them time but not victory. The creatures were learning from the experience and adapting their defenses. Sir, So Young Kim called out as she helped an injured colonist toward the transport beam. I'm detecting long-range communications from these creatures. They're not just talking to each other. They're sending signals deep into space. Dr. Sun-hee heard this and felt ice in her veins. They're scouts, she realized. This whole attack was just reconnaissance. They're reporting back to something bigger. The transport beams worked frantically to get everyone aboard the Soul's Pride. The ship groaned under the weight of far too many people. Air recycling systems strained to provide oxygen for 1,400 souls. Food synthesizers calculated they had supplies for maybe a week. As the last transport beam energized, carrying Admiral Tae-ho and the final group of survivors to safety, the Devourers began to sing again. But this time, their crystal voices carried a different tone. Not the music of feeding, but the sound of summoning. Somewhere in deep space, something enormous heard their call and began to move toward the galaxy's inhabited worlds. The real invasion was still coming, and humanity had just painted a target on every human colony in space. The Soul's Pride was dying. Admiral Tae-ho Choi stood on his crowded bridge and listened to the constant alarms telling him his ship was failing. 1,400 people breathed the air meant for 200. The life support system screamed warnings as carbon dioxide levels rose and oxygen levels dropped. How long do we have? He asked Chief Engineer Kyung-ho Shin. Kyung-ho wiped sweat from his face. The ship's temperature was rising because the cooling systems could not handle the extra heat from so many bodies. Maybe 6 hours before the air becomes toxic. The food synthesizers are already failing from overuse. Navigation Officer Mira Kang looked up from her console with grim news. The nearest human colony is 12 days away. The closest Earth Defense Force base is 18 days. Sir, we won't make it to any human port. Tae-ho studied the star charts. There was only one option within range of their failing ship. What about Epsilon Station? The Galactic Consortium monitoring post? Mira checked her calculations. 4 days away, but sir, they've never allowed human ships to dock there. They consider us too primitive. They'll have to make an exception, Tae-ho said grimly. In the medical bay, Dr. Haewon Park worked desperately to save colonists who had been exposed to devourer toxins. Some had touched the crystal creatures during the evacuation. Others had breathed air contaminated by the creatures' waste products. The toxins attacked human nervous systems, causing seizures and hallucinations. I need more medical supplies, Haewon told anyone who would listen. These people are dying and I can't help them with basic first aid equipment. Colony Administrator Jaemin Park, now a refugee on the ship that had saved his people, helped coordinate the overcrowded survivors. Families were separated because there was no room to stay together. People slept in shifts because there was not enough floor space for everyone to lie down at once. We need to ration everything, he announced over the ship's communication system. Water, food, even air. Everyone gets half rations until we reach a safe port. The Soul's Pride limped toward Epsilon Station, while its crew performed miracles of engineering to keep 1,400 people alive. They shut down all non-essential systems. They recycled wastewater and processed carbon dioxide through emergency filters. They opened airlocks between sections to share breathable air throughout the ship. But as they approached Epsilon Station, their problems were just beginning. This is Epsilon Station Control, came the cold voice of Veltar Commander Zichkar. Human vessel Soul's Pride, you are not authorized to dock at this facility. Change course immediately. Admiral Tae-ho had expected this response. Epsilon Station, we are carrying 1,400 civilians in distress. Our life support is failing. We request emergency docking under galactic humanitarian protocols. Humanitarian protocols do not apply to species that have not demonstrated sufficient intelligence to qualify for protection, Zichkar replied. Humans remain on probationary status with the Galactic Consortium. Find another port. Through the bridge windows, Tae-ho could see Epsilon Station growing larger as they approached. It was a massive structure, built by 12 different alien species working together. It had docking bays large enough for ships 10 times the size of the Soul's Pride. It had medical facilities that could treat any known disease. It had food synthesizers that could produce meals for thousands of people. And they were not allowed to use any of it because humans were considered too stupid to deserve help. "Sir," said Communications Officer So-Young Kim, "I'm receiving transmissions from the station. Multiple alien species are debating whether to help us. The Althari Republic is arguing in our favor, but the Veltar and Jek are blocking any assistance. Teho made a decision that would change everything. Broadcast Dr. Sun He's research data on all frequencies. Make sure every species on that station sees what we learned about the Devourers." Dr. Sun Hee Bei had spent the journey analyzing everything she had observed during the attack on New Busan Colony. Her findings were terrifying. "The creatures that attacked us were scouts," she announced over the ship's communication system so all the aliens could hear. "They were testing our defenses and learning about human technology. But more importantly, they were reporting to something much larger. I estimate the main invasion force will arrive in this galaxy within 2 months." The reaction on Epsilon Station was immediate. Species that had been debating human intelligence levels suddenly found themselves discussing survival strategies. The Devourers were not just a human problem. They were a threat to every living thing in the galaxy. The scout creatures consumed everything they encountered, Sun He continued. Organic matter, technology, even planetary crust. The main invasion force will be millions of times larger. No single species will be able to resist them alone. Commander Zichkar's voice came back over the radio, but it sounded different now. Less arrogant, more concerned. "Human vessel, you may dock at Base 7. Prepare for immediate quarantine and medical inspection." The Soul's Pride docked at Epsilon Station like a wounded bird landing in a nest of predators. Alien security teams boarded the ship expecting to find primitive humans in panic and chaos. Instead, they found disciplined survivors who had organized themselves into efficient groups. Children helped elderly colonists. Engineers shared technical knowledge with medical staff. Everyone worked together despite overcrowded conditions and failing life support. "They're not panicking," observed Althari Security Chief Ventar as he watched the human evacuation procedures. "Most species would have descended into chaos under these conditions. But look at them. They're taking care of each other." The alien medical teams were surprised by human physiology. They had expected a primitive species with simple biology. Instead, they found complex immune systems that could adapt to devourer toxins, redundant organ systems that kept functioning even under extreme stress, and psychological resilience that allowed humans to remain calm in life-threatening situations. "Their stress hormones are off the charts," reported the Zhek medical officer. "But instead of becoming irrational, it seems to make them more focused and cooperative. This makes no sense according to our psychological models." Admiral Teho found himself in the station's main conference room, facing representatives from 12 different alien species. Some looked like giant insects. Others resembled living crystals or floating energy clouds. All of them wanted to know more about the threat approaching their galaxy. "You claim these devourers are coming in greater numbers," said Zichkar. "What evidence do you have?" Tactical Officer Wu Jin-nam presented his analysis on a holographic display. The attack patterns on New Busan Colony were too sophisticated for mindless creatures. They systematically removed our defenses in a specific order. They consumed our technology and immediately adapted it for their own use. This indicates advanced intelligence and long-term planning. "And the communication signals we detected," added So-Young Kim. "The creatures were transmitting data constantly during the attack. Detailed information about human technology, our defensive capabilities, our weaknesses. Someone was collecting intelligence for a larger operation." The aliens looked at each other with growing concern. They had dismissed the New Busan attack as a minor incident involving a primitive species. Now they were realizing it might have been the opening move in a war that could destroy their entire civilization. "What do you propose we do about this threat?" asked the Althari representative. Admiral Teho stood up slowly. He was tired and his ship was barely functional, but he had an idea that might save everyone in the galaxy. "We fight together," he said simply. "Every species, every ship, every weapon we have. The Devourers are coming whether we're ready or not. But they've made one mistake. They assumed that because we're different species, we can't work together. They're about to learn how wrong they are." The conference room fell silent. Ancient alien species stared at the human admiral who was proposing something that had never been tried before. a combined fleet with ships from every major civilization in the galaxy. It was either the most brilliant strategy ever conceived, or the desperate plan of a species too young to understand how impossible it was. Either way, it was their only hope. The combined fleet gathered at the edge of the Kepler 442 system looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. Feltar crystal ships floated beside Zek war cruisers. Althari exploration vessels flew in formation with Corvani defense platforms. 12 different species had contributed ships, weapons, and crew to face the approaching Devourer mothership. Admiral Teho Choi stood on the bridge of the fleet flagship, a massive Veltar battleship called the Crystal Harmony. Around him, alien officers worked at stations designed for different types of hands and different types of eyes. The air smelled of chemicals he could not identify, and the artificial gravity felt slightly wrong for human bodies. "Sensor contact," announced the Zek tactical officer, massive signature emerging from hyperspace. Distance 50,000 kilometers and closing. The main screen showed something that defied comprehension. The Devourer mothership was not built like any vessel the galaxy species had ever constructed. It looked like a living mountain of crystal and metal, growing and changing shape as they watched. Smaller crystal creatures crawled across its surface like insects on a hive. It was larger than most moons, and it sang with the voices of millions of crystal beings. Fleet status report. Teho requested. 147 ships ready for combat, reported Commander Zichikar, who now served as Teho's second-in-command. All species have contributed their most advanced vessels. We have enough firepower to destroy a small planet. The alien fleet commanders had been skeptical about taking orders from a human, but Admiral Teho had proven himself during the evacuation of New Busan Colony. More importantly, human military tactics were unlike anything the other species had ever encountered. Where alien warfare was formal and predictable, human combat doctrine was chaotic and adaptable. "Begin attack pattern Alpha," Teho ordered. The combined fleet opened fire with everything they had. Veltar crystal cannons shot beams of pure energy. Zek plasma torpedoes exploded against the mothership's hull. Althari particle accelerators fired streams of antimatter. For several minutes, the Devourer ship was hidden behind a wall of explosions and energy discharge. When the weapons stopped firing and the energy clouds cleared, the mothership was still there. But now it was larger than before. It had absorbed every attack and used the energy to grow stronger. Worse, it had learned from each weapon type and was now generating defensive fields specifically designed to counter them. "Conventional assault has failed," Zichkar reported with barely controlled panic. "The creature is adapting to our weapons faster than we can modify them." Around the fleet, alien commanders began to retreat. This was exactly what their military doctrines taught them to do when faced with a superior enemy. Withdraw, regroup, and attack from a more advantageous position. But Teho had different ideas. "All ships implement Chaos Protocol," he ordered. The alien officers looked confused. Chaos Protocol was not something they had trained for. But the human crews throughout the fleet understood immediately. Instead of attacking in coordinated waves, each ship began to act independently. Some flew straight at the mothership. Others circled around to attack from behind. A few ships flew in seemingly random patterns, firing at empty space. Several vessels began spinning wildly while shooting in all directions. To the aliens, it looked like the humans had lost their minds. To the Devourers, it was something they had never encountered before. Their hive mind was designed to process organized, predictable attacks. The chaotic human assault created too much conflicting information for them to analyze effectively. "The creature is slowing its defensive adaptations," reported Wu Jin Nam from his tactical station. "The random attack patterns are confusing its learning algorithms. But even chaos could only work for so long." The mothership began to recover from its confusion and started targeting individual ships. Its crystal weapons were devastatingly accurate. Several alien vessels exploded in the first few minutes of the new assault phase. That was when Admiral Young Soo Han arrived with the Earth Defense Forceman Battle Group. "Sorry we're late to the party." Han's voice crackled over the communication system as 30 human warships dropped out of hyperspace. "Had to stop and pick up some friends on the way." The friends were every available human ship in 3 sectors. Military vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even mining ships had been armed with whatever weapons could be found and pressed into service. They were not all modern warships, but they were all crewed by humans who understood that retreat was not an option. "Young Soo," Good to see you, Tejo replied. We're going to need every trick we know for this one. The human reinforcements did not join the chaotic assault. Instead, they began implementing something even stranger. Ships started ramming the mothership at high speed, but not to cause damage. They were delivering boarding parties directly into the creature's body. Boarding parties? Zichkar sounded incredulous. You cannot board a living creature the size of a moon. Watch. Us, said Lieutenant Jenna Rowe as she led her. Marines through a breach torn in the mothership's hull by a suicide cargo hauler. Inside, the Devourer mothership. The human boarding parties found a nightmare landscape of organic crystal formations and absorbed technology. The creature had consumed ships, stations, and entire planets. All of that stolen material had been incorporated into its body, creating a maze of passages and chambers that defied understanding. But the humans had brought something the Devourers had never encountered before. Dr. Sun Hee Bei and her biological warfare virus. The creatures share a collective consciousness. Sun Hee explained over the radio as she worked with her portable laboratory in the mothership's central nerve cluster. But that connection works both ways. If I can introduce the right kind of confusion into their shared mind, it should spread throughout the entire hive. She was not talking about a computer virus or an electromagnetic pulse. She was talking about a psychological virus, a pattern of thoughts and ideas designed to cause cascade failures in a hive mind that had never learned to deal with individual creativity. The virus is based on human cognitive patterns. Sun Hee continued as she prepared the injection system, specifically our ability to hold contradictory ideas simultaneously and our tendency to question authority. Concepts that should be impossible for a collective consciousness to process. Engineer Dong Jun-yoon helped her connect the injection system to the mothership's neural network. Around them, crystal creatures tried to stop the humans, but the boarding parties held them off with weapons that had been modified based on lessons learned at New Busan Colony. Virus uploaded, Sun Hee announced, beginning propagation through the hive network. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the mothership, crystal creatures began to move erratically. Some started attacking each other. Others began dismantling parts of their own ship. The coordinated assault on the human fleet faltered as individual devourers began acting on their own, instead of following hive commands. It's working, reported Young Soo-han from his flagship. The mothership is breaking apart. Internal explosions throughout the structure. But the virus did more than just destroy the mothership. It spread to every devourer in the galaxy through their quantum communication network. Scout ships that had been heading toward other colonies suddenly changed course and began flying in circles. Advance forces that had been preparing to attack alien homeworlds started consuming each other instead of their intended targets. The Great Devourer invasion was over before it could truly begin, defeated not by superior weapons or overwhelming force, but by the most human thing possible. The ability to think as individuals while still working together toward a common goal. As the mothership collapsed into fragments of dead crystal, Admiral Tejo looked around at his mixed-species crew. Aliens who had once considered humans too primitive to deserve help now worked side by side with human officers. They had learned something important about the galaxy's youngest spacefaring species. Communication from Earth, announced So Young Kim from her station. Command wants to know if we need reinforcements. Tejo smiled as he looked at the wreckage of the Devourer fleet drifting past the bridge windows. Tell them thanks, but we had help. Good help. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The Galactic Consortium revised its policies on human intelligence and granted Earth full membership with voting rights. Alien species that had once looked down on humans now competed to establish military exchanges and learn human tactical doctrine. But perhaps most importantly, a new protocol was established throughout the galaxy. When a distress signal was transmitted on emergency frequencies, it would be answered. Species would help each other not because they were required to by law, but because they had learned from humans that civilized beings do not abandon each other in times of need. Admiral Tejo Choi eventually returned to patrol duty aboard a new ship, the Soul's Pride 2. His crew included humans and aliens working together as equals. When asked why he chose to return to routine patrols instead of accepting command of the new interspecies fleet, his answer was simple. Someone needs to be ready for the next SOS, he said, because in a galaxy full of different species and ancient civilizations, the most important thing we learned is that no one fights.